We just looked at creating a simple time and material project. With a simple example, it could be conceived that the project was processed as one project where there wasn't complex planning or accounting requirements. More often than not, there are complexities that are suited better by having a project structure, also known as a project hierarchy. For example, if you are implementing an ERP such as Dynamics AX, you may gain more insight when distinct phases of the project's activities are split into separate sub-projects. Let's talk about when you could use a sub-project to build a project hierarchy. Here are some common scenarios where a sub-project may be a good choice. Scenario one would be to achieve a project structure that reflects the different project initiatives. Some examples of that could be a project where you have multiple phases. It could be a phase one, a phase two, a phase three. So here's a graphical representation of how you could handle that. You could have a header project with the different phases underneath that. So your header project, you're not really tracking any sort of cost or any sort of transactions towards that. It's just basically a figurehead. And then you have your different phases laid out below that. So you could report at the header level and it would pull in all its sub-projects. But at the phase one and phase two level, you can assign different resources to each phase, have a different plan for each phase, just control them like their own like they're their own project, and then report at a summary level through the header. Another example when you could use a sub-project would be to process special accounting requirements. Yeah, a good example of this is when a client requests you to bill for time and materials during a fixed price project. And actually, I've run into this multiple times where they have a fixed price project running and then there's some kind of scenario that comes up during that fixed price project and they're like, just bill us for the time and material. Well, Native AX, you can't do that through a fixed price project, so you could create a sub project of time and material type for the same contract, which means the same customer, and then you could log all the time and material that they want to be billed for to that project and then bill them in summary if you wanted to, a milestone from the fixed price and the time and material from the time and material project. Third example would be grouping the project history. That's an example when you would want to use a sub-project. Here's a actual real world example: ability to understand additional work on top of the initial project and to group financials. So a visual will help with this one. So a good example would be maybe you are installing equipment at a customer site. So you could have the top level project be the customer site, and then each piece of equipment that you're installing could be the first level, which would be install 1 and install 2. So that could be item XYZ and item ABC. And then anytime you're servicing that, you could have a time and material type project to track all the service towards each job. You can get a composite overview of all the costs and revenue from each project at the top level, or you can go break it down at any of the sub-project levels to understand the specific work and what type of work at each sub-level. All right, so those are some scenarios when you can use sub-projects. Let's review some of the concepts of creating a project structure in Dynamics AX. So as we're seeing, we have a list of 3 topics. We have parent project, a child project, or a sub-project, and then we have a header project. So basically, the parent project is any project that has child projects, and a child project is a project underneath a project or a sub-project. And then I guess the header project is a parent project where you cannot log any transactions towards. So if you look at the diagram on the right side, we have the top level, which is a parent, and then we go down a level, which are child projects, technically, of the original parent project. And then each one of the child projects has its own children too, so they're technically a parent and a child. What we could do is there's just a easy checkbox that you can flag at any level in a project structure that marks it as a header. So you check that checkbox, and then if you try and post transactions towards that header level project, you get an error saying, no, you can't do that. I think the specific error is project XYZ is defined as a header project. Registration should be done on a sub project. So those are some of the concepts that you'll see in Dynamics AX, parent, child, and header projects. Now we'll demonstrate how to set up and create a project hierarchy. Specifically, we'll define the sub-project format. We'll create a project hierarchy, and then we'll define the top level of that project hierarchy as a header project. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is setting up and creating a project hierarchy. So the first piece of setup that you need to complete before creating a sub-project is to define a parameter. So if we go under modules and then project management and accounting, and then go to setup, project management and accounting parameters, there's a field that we need to define in here. You technically do not need to define this to create a sub-project, but it's very helpful. And I know over the years that I've taken AX requests, I've got asked multiple times how you default this information in. So we're in the parameters here, and we're on the general tab or the general hyperlink, however you want to define it. And then if you scroll over to the right, there is a project-specific area. So the first thing that you can do is when you can set up a default project type, and we'll just keep ours as time and material, but when you create a project, it will just say, well, this is the default one that will default in. So we'll say time and material. And then this is the field that I really wanted to point out is the default sub-project ID format. So technically what happens is when you create the parent project, it's going to give a number, and that number comes from a number sequence on the number sequence tab for project ID. So it's going to look here and read the settings for your number sequence code. And then if you try and create a sub-project, it's going to go, all right, well, what's the format? And here's where you can define the format. You can put a format in as just a pound sign. And then if you try and create a sub-project, it's going to use the number, and it would go number 1 if we used this format. What I always like to do is have a separator. So I always put the dash in there, and then I always put pound in case we get into double-digit sub-projects, and you potentially could. The limitation on how many sub-projects that you potentially can have is how many characters you have to create a project number. So out of the box in the latest version of AX, it's 20 character limit. In the past, it was 10, and we always ran into constraints. So now it's been doubled. So you can get as long as 20 characters total with including your sub-project ID. So you can have pretty extensive hierarchies. And it's always possible to modify the data type to have a longer decimal, or not decimal precision, but character precision. So if you want to have 30 characters, you can modify the data type to do so. Yeah, and then this final setting here, I'll just knock these out while we're here, is the prompt for customer information. So basically, when you define anything as a customer-facing project, it will ask you, it will prompt you, do you want to use the customer information? And you just either get to pick a yes or no. So, all right, we set up the sub-project ID format, and that's the primary one that I wanted to talk towards, and we'll see how that's used here in a second. So what we'll do is we'll jump into a project, or the all projects form. And from here, we'll create a new project. And here's the default, so you can see it defaulted in as time and material from our parameters, and we'll just call this our header project. And we'll assign a group, and we'll just assign an existing contract. I'll just pick the first one in the list, and I'll throw PM on there. Okay, and for our scenario, we'll pretend that we have multiple phases to the project, so we're going to create a structure. All right, so from here, we basically have a simple example where we only have one project. But now I want to create a sub-project. How do I do so? Well, the first thing that you should look at is on the project hierarchy tab. You can see our default sub-project ID format populated in here. So when I was saying you don't necessarily have to define the parameters, that's true because you can always come in at the project level and update the ID format to whatever you want. So if we had nothing in the parameters, it would come in like this. And if I tried to create a new sub-project, you'd see that it's grayed out up here. So from a troubleshooting perspective, if you ever see a grayed out sub-project, you know why. You got to define a sub-project ID and then save. Once you have that, you can create a sub-project. So since the top level I want to keep as a header project, I'm going to toggle this toggle on, and then I'm going to create a new sub-project. And you can see that our default type pulled in. Here's the format that was added. So our original project was 147, which you can see on the top left. And it added the -01 because it's our first sub-project, and it used all the settings that our header project had. If you want to adjust it to a different type of project, you definitely can. So I'm just going to keep things the same, and I'm just going to call this phase 1. And then now you see we get this additional pane where we get to see the whole structure, which is pretty cool. So if you want to change any defaults on the on the header, you can. So good example is here's the dimensions we have on the header. And if I change those, what is pretty cool, well, first of all, I should show you at phase 1, all the settings from your header get rolled down to the sub-projects. So if you change something at the header level, I'll just change the department to the finance department, and I'll save. You can see that we get a prompt that says, what do you want to do with that change? Do you just want the parent to be updated? The sub-projects that share the current value only, so the ones that originally had the 23 department, do you want them to turn to 24, or do you just want to roll it to all sub-projects? And I'm just going to say roll it down to all sub-projects. All right, and you can see that 24 is now updated to my my phase 1. So we want to create a phase 2. Well, I can create a sub-project underneath this one if I wanted to, but that would be a sub-project. I don't want to do that. I want to select my header, and I want to pick the right level that I want to create, and I'm going to go phase 2. All right, so now we have phase 2. And this is where I'm saying, well, how deep can you get the project structure to go? Because you can just keep adding sub-projects if you wanted to. I'll say we have a fixed price one where we do some sort of install under phase 2. And you can keep going just as long as this number doesn't exceed 20 characters, which is the length that you can go to out of the box. I don't know how many characters I have going on here. 3, 6, 9, 12, 14. So I can go quite a ways down yet. And the cool part about this too is when you're running, for instance, reports like project statement or something, I'll go to the header level and I can click the project statement button, pulls me into the project statement, and you can see that there's a toggle on there that says include sub-projects. So it will run a financial statement or a project statement, including all the information from the sub-projects if you allow it to. And a lot of the out-of-the-box reports have this type of functionality. It will ask you, how deep do you want to go in the hierarchy? Okay, so that's really what I wanted to show you to demonstrate how you can create a project hierarchy and some of the bells and whistles that go along with it.